I would love to speak today on the title, Called to Influence. Called to Influence. This is a key moment in the life of our church, life of our city. Lots of opportunities and probably a few challenges as well. And it's for such a time as this that I think God has drawn people together, called them by name, gifted them, and is starting to kind of reveal people's purpose in the midst of our church. I just want to say, you might think it's random that you're here today, but it's not random. There's a purpose to your presence here. You might sometimes feel like it's random that you have a job where you have a job, or that you've ended up in the family you've ended up, or that you're in the community you're in. It's not random. There's a purpose to your presence there. God has positioned you where he's placed you in order that you might bear influence in that context. And sometimes we have a complex relationship with the word influence because we're a little bit nervous about it. We don't want to be tainted by it. We're a little bit apprehensive about the idea of influence. And there's good reasons for that. We follow someone who exercised the greatest influence the world has ever seen by pouring out their influence on the cross. Actually, Jesus surrendered his influence for the sake of the world, and by doing so, had the greatest influence of anyone who's ever lived. So it seems there's such a thing as godly influence, to seek to shape the places and spaces where God has called you to live and work and have his being, to seek to bless other people with the influence that Jesus has given to you. Because at the end of the day, if the same Spirit who raised Jesus from dead to life lives on the inside of you, and if you place your trust in Jesus, he does. If the same Spirit who raised Jesus from death to life lives on the inside of you, then influence is now a part of your identity. And you're going to have to work out how you steward the influence that's been entrusted to you. So, called to influence. And I'm going to read this little passage in Matthew 5. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how could it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." The first thing we see in this passage is that you're called to be distinct. Be distinct. Jesus is teaching a crowd of people, including his disciples. And he's just been teaching on something called the Beatitudes, the blessings, what it looks like to live a life, a blessed life in the kingdom that Jesus is establishing. And it's surprising. It looks a little bit different how we might expect. Jesus says that there's blessing in humility, there's blessing in meekness, there's blessing in holiness, there's blessing in mercy, there's blessing in peacemaking. There can even be blessing when you're mourning, and there can be blessing when people are persecuting you. And then, having taught on that, Jesus turns to them and says, "You are the salt of the earth." Not you could be the salt of the earth, not I wish you were the salt of the earth, not you might be the salt of the earth if you try really hard to be, but you are the salt of the earth. Your identity, your purpose, wherever God has positioned you, is to be salt. And salt, as you know, has two main functions. It amplifies flavor, draws out the best, amplifies flavor, and it resists decay. Salt resists decay. Its main function actually at this time was to resist decay. Salt would be used as a preservative. It was the thing you would put into food in order to stop the food going bad. You'd use salt, especially in meat, to stop it going bad. And actually, even in wounds, if you can imagine something more painful than this, if someone had an open wound, you would put salt into the wound in order to restrict the growth of bacteria, in order to prevent the infection, in order to resist decay. Salt stops things going bad. And it does that by being different to the thing it's applied to. Salt is a different chemical compound to that which is applied to. Salt, sodium chloride, NaCl. And if salt loses its saltiness, then it's useless. No good for anything. To have value, to have influence, it has to be distinct. And I don't know about you, but I find it so tempting in life to just fit in and go with the flow in a community, in a workplace, in a friendship group. It's so tempting to just operate according to everyone else's value system instead of bringing the value system you feel called to bring into that place. I'll never forget, as a young lawyer, being taken for lunch by one of the very senior lawyers in my company. And they say there's no such thing as a free lunch. I did not know that at 22. And the first course was great. It was really great food, really enjoying it. This is amazing. And then the main course arrived, looked fantastic. I put one bite into my mouth and he looked at me, he narrowed his eyes and he said, "Stephen, tell me, what's all the gossip about all your colleagues at the junior end of the company?" And I was like, and I thought, what do I do? How do I respond? Like, I'm here, he's took me out for a whole lunch. And I thought, but I don't want to gossip about these people. You know, they're my colleagues, they're my friends. And I just felt completely torn. There was this long silence. And then eventually, I kind of summoned up just enough courage to say, oh, well, actually, I try not to gossip because I'm a Christian. That was an awkward thing to say at lunch. I'm just telling you. There was an even longer silence after I said it than before I said it. He didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to look. I was thinking, why did I say that? That's such an embarrassing thing to say. I could have thought of something else. Anyway, for the next 20 minutes, all you heard was the sound of cutlery on crockery. It was very awkward. And it turned out that he didn't have an opposition to the idea of gossip. He then went and told everyone else in the company, can you believe it? Stephen doesn't believe in gossip. How weird is that? And so everyone was aware that I didn't gossip. So embarrassing. But then what I found over the following months and even years was that really senior people in the organization would come and knock on my door and they'd come in. They'd say, Steve, you got 5 minutes? I go, yeah, sure. And then they'd want to ask me about like relationships, their marriages, about difficult situations, difficult ethical questions. And I'm thinking, why is everyone coming to me? I'm like 25 years old. I ain't got much wisdom. But it's because they knew that when I spoke to them, it would stay with me. I wasn't gonna gossip. You know, sometimes the thing that makes you distinct might be the most important gift you can bring to your company or your organization or your culture. You're called to be distinct. The influence you carry is tied to the distinction you embody. And God knows how to look after those who are faithful to him, who are obedient to him. He knows how to honor integrity and obedience. Just want to encourage you, don't apologize for being different. Don't apologize for being distinct, seeing things differently, living in a different way. You know, I think we're entering into a season where people are open to different ways of living. We've just been hearing about that. Such powerful stories. Someone said to me recently, they said, secularism is undergoing a faith crisis. People are realizing that old assumptions about the way we should live our lives aren't holding true. And they're looking for ancient sources of wisdom and guidance and values. And that might be the very thing you carry where God has called you. You, entirely you, as distinct, might be the greatest blessing to the people you are with. Well, actually, when I very first started working as a lawyer, as a barrister, I had grown up in quite a rough context. My school was quite a rough school. So rough, in fact, they bulldozed it. It's not there anymore. And it's what these days you would call a failing school because it failed. So when I arrived in this kind of world of barristers, and I I was very conscious. I had no one in that world before. And so there were all these like hidden rules and hidden ways of doing things and hidden behaviors that I wasn't even conscious of. On my first day, I turned up and my boss looked at me and he said, "Who taught you to tie a tie?" And I said, "Me." And he said, "You look like a footballer." And I didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult. And then he said, "Where did you buy your suit?" And I said, "Suits Direct." And he didn't react to that in the way I was anticipating him reacting to that. I said, "I got the waistcoat for free." And so for the whole first month, I was like, do you know what? Maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I'm too different to these other people. And then the first case we did, it was a guy who was alleged to have imported a very large amount of drugs. And he'd driven the vehicle with all the drugs in. And my boss said to me, he said, "Look, Steve, it's a very difficult case. He's almost certainly going to be convicted because it's millions and millions of pounds worth of drugs. So why would the cartel, why would the conspiracy not have involved him? He must have been part of the cartel because he was driving the vehicle, because you would never entrust that many drugs to someone who didn't know what was going on." And I was like, "Well, yes and no." He said, "What do you mean yes and no?" I said, "Well, there's no honor amongst thieves. I mean, when you think about it, the drugs are well sealed, they're tightly packed, they're designed to get through customs, not obvious to anyone. Why take the risk on the driver? He doesn't need to know that he could cut the cartel out of the deal and sell millions of pounds of drugs to someone else. He might be an informant. A conspiracy is only as strong as the weakest link in its chain. You know, when it comes to it, cartels like this tend to operate on a need-to-know basis. That's how criminal gangs work, in my experience. He looked at me and he said, "What is your experience, Stephen?" I was like, "Oh, just friends and, you know, those kind of things." Anyway, he used this line in his closing speech. The guy was acquitted, and my boss was so happy, he bought me a new tie and a new suit. What makes you distinct might be the greatest possible gift to your culture. And the source of our distinction is Jesus, our connection to Jesus. We become more salty, more able to rub off on the people around us the closer we are to him. The greater Jesus' influence on us, the greater our influence will be on the world. And in my experience, there's two risks. The first risk is we are so immersed in the world. We're so immersed, we go with the flow so much, we try so hard to appear part of the in crowd, indistinguishable from the world around us, that one day we wake up and we are indistinguishable from the world around us. We lost our saltiness. We've lost the very thing that makes us different. But the other risk is that we're so desperate to be different, we're so desperate to be distinct, that we separate ourselves from the people who desperately need our influence. And we stay a step away. In the Beatitudes, which Jesus is teaching just before this passage, every one of the Beatitudes is designed to be applied into complex situations involving actual real people. Mercy, humility, meekness in the context of challenging situations and real life. You're designed to be applied. And I would encourage you this week, why don't you give yourself a little performance review? Just ask yourself, how salty actually am I? So I've got some salt here. So there we are. So you can just encourage you. Maybe just want to take a handful of salt this week. Just, put it maybe in a little pile on your desk at work. Maybe in your classroom at work, just a little pile of salt. Don't put it in a line. HR will get involved quite quickly. Just put it in a pile and just remind yourself, I'm salt. I'm called here to be salt. I've been placed here to bring something distinct. And you can say to yourself, as long as I'm here, as long as I'm in this context, I'm going to rub off on the people and context around me. This is going to be a better company because I'm present, because I'm going to resist the bad and I'm going to call out the good. This is going to be a better culture because I'm in it, because I'm not just going to be influenced by the culture. I'm going to shape the culture in the context where I've been called to live and work and have my being, because I'm salt. I'm distinct. I'm not going to stay away. I'm going to get involved because I'm designed to be applied to the places where God has called me and placed me. You are salt. Take some. Put it where you work. Put it where you are. And remind yourself, you are salt. Now you might say, well, I'm on my own. There's only one Christian in my organization. There's only one person who even has faith in my context. Well, you need 2 kilos of food a day. Do you know how much salt you need a day? About 6 grams. So you need roughly, 0.3%. 1 in 300. So if there's 1 in 300, that's enough. Doesn't take much salt to season a whole organism. Doesn't take much salt to shift the character of the place you've been called to be. I think of a young doctor who came up to me a few years ago and she said, I've got this difficult ethical challenge. I said, tell me about it. She said, well, they're doing a big consultation, hospital in another city. And I said to her, oh, right, what's the issue? She says, well, for me, they're talking about introducing something which I think would be wrong. And for me, it's like an issue of conscience. It's like an ethical thing. And I want to do something, but I'm nervous about, standing out. And I said, have you talked to anyone about it? She said, yeah, I talked to senior people in the hospital. And they said, yeah, we completely agree with you. It would be great if you could respond to the consultation on that. We'd love to, but it's a bit risky for us as senior people. So if you as a junior person could do that, that'd be great. So after a while, she ummed and ahed about it. We chatted about it, and she said, no, I think I'm going to do it. So she responded to this consultation. She said what she thought. Do you know there were thousands of people who could have responded on that issue? Thousands. The people who conducted the consultation got in touch with her afterwards. They said, you were the only person who addressed it. And we agree with you. We just needed one independent voice to say what you said. And now we're not going to implement the policy. Don't underestimate the power of your influence. Can shape a whole hospital, can shape a whole business, can shape a whole school, can shape a whole community. You don't need much salt to season a city. You don't need much salt to season a church. You don't need much salt to season a company. One voice. And I think this is a time when the people in this church are going to be called into surprising influence in unexpected places. You're going to be called to use your voice for God's purposes wherever he has positioned you. You are distinct. But then the second thing we see is be bright. Your light. Jesus says you're the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. It's so interesting because Jesus says elsewhere, I'm the light of the world. And then here he says, you are the light of the world. And that means when you place your trust in Jesus, when you place your trust in what he has done for you on the cross, when you put your weight, your hope on him, when you believe that he's paid the price for your sin, he's paid the price that you might know forgiveness and freedom, and you might be adopted as a daughter, a son of the Most High God, and therefore you can come into a relationship with God through Jesus. When you place your trust in him, he lives in you by the Spirit. And that means that he who is the light of the world lives in you, and therefore you have the light of the world within you. And therefore wherever you go, you carry the light of the world. Light doesn't have to try to shine. It's the natural quality of light to be visible and to shine. You don't have to force it. Light will shine if you just let it. And because together we can become like a city on a hill because of its position and because of its concentration of light, it can be seen for miles around. Light illuminates, it brings clarity, it focuses perception, it brings understanding and revelation. Light enables you to find innovative solutions to challenging problems that others can't see. It's the reason the motto of Oxford University is Dominus Illuminatio Mea. The Lord is my light. And for centuries, Christian scholars have led the most extraordinary scientific discoveries within this city, illuminated by their faith. No separation between science and faith, illuminated by their faith. Bijan Amrami wrote a book this year talking about a number of ways in which the Christian faith has shaped this nation and then shaped the world. And there are a number of pages in that book specifically focused on this city and the way in which scholars, Christian Oxford scholars in every field, shaped the world's understanding for centuries and are still doing that today. Found it so interesting. One of them, Robert Grossi Tiesti, he happened to be the Bishop of Lincoln at the same time as being a professor in the university, which tells me I need to work harder or smarter, I don't know. But he wrote books on astronomy, on physics. He wrote a cutting edge work on the very nature of light. Centuries ago. His conviction that the Lord is the light, the revelation, driving cutting-edge scientific discovery, as it's doing today. People within this community, within this church, probably going to win Nobel Prizes in the coming years. If you've already won one, I'm so sorry you didn't tell me. But that's what's likely to happen. And Jesus says, no one lights a light and then puts it under a bowl. Of course, because that would be crazy. I mean, why would you light a light and put it under a bowl? That would be madness. You'd never do that because then you can't see the light. We'd never do that. That would be nuts. But if you're anything like me, sometimes on Sunday we're like, how great is our God. Sing with me. And then on Monday when someone shows you an email you don't like, you're like, back off. And then on Sunday, we're like, oh, how great is our God. It's great, yeah. How great. And then at the water cooler on Monday morning, when someone says to you, did you get up to anything yesterday? You're like, oh, yeah, I did. I went somewhere. Oh, where'd you go? Oh, just somewhere in the center of the city. Oh, right. New place? No, quite old, actually. Oh, right. Busy? Yeah, really busy. All right. Do you have food there? Yeah, a croissant and ice cream. All right, interesting. Strange. Near G&D's? You're very close to G&D's. Yeah. Good music? Yeah, it was great. Sounds really interesting. What kind of place is it? Oh, I went to church. We're so tempted to hide the light that God has given us, but light is not designed to be hidden. The natural quality of light is to shine. You're called to shine. And this is a time, I think, in our city and around the country where many people want to know what it is that you carry. If you just let your light shine, it will provoke all sorts of questions and invitations and conversations. Don't put your light under a bucket. That would be crazy. And then we see here, for us as a church, a city on a hill. One of the things I love about this church is that actually together, as our light is brought together and concentrated, we shine across the city. And people see your good deeds. I'll never forget when Beth and I moved here. We moved here in the pandemic, the second lockdown, horrible time to move. And every school we phoned up pretty much, the people were almost laughing at us. They were like, you're moving in a lockdown, in the middle of a year and you want a place for your child at school? Are you crazy? And after loads of calls, I got through to one head teacher. And he said, can I just ask you? He said, why are you moving now? And I said, well, actually, I'm coming to lead a church in the center of Oxford. He said, oh, which church? I said, oh, it's called St. Aldates. He goes, I've heard of that church. He said, they do lots of good for this city. And they really, really try and help people. I've heard a lot about that church. I was so moved. Let your light shine, that people might see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. And that's what we're seeing across the city. We're seeing people who are in recovery from addiction supported. We're seeing the vulnerable cared for. We're seeing vulnerable women across our city brought into community and given support. We're seeing this Friday, 2 days ago, over 350 youth in our church, worshiping Jesus, inviting friends, hundreds of students connecting in, young adults on Monday night, just so many connecting in. We're trying to do our best to bless the city in all sorts of different ways. Happened to be on a panel once with Tom Wright, N.T. Wright, who's one of the most prominent theologians of the last 100 years. And just to be honest, I didn't contribute a lot to the panel. There were 3 questions, and Tom answered each of them first. And my contribution was to say, I agree with Tom. And said that 3 times, actually. And that was enough. Sometimes discretion's the better part of valor. But there was one group of people who were there who were pastors in the Middle East. And they asked the question, how do we survive and even thrive in a time of intense persecution in our nation? Fascinating question. Not a hypothetical question at all. The church is being burnt down, pastors being killed, people being tortured and imprisoned. And Tom said, well, I can tell you what my friend who pastored in the Middle East for years advises. He said, build your churches on top of your schools, on top of your hospitals, on top of your doctor's surgeries. Sounds strange, but Christians in the Middle East have for centuries built schools and built hospitals and built doctor's surgeries to bless the cities, to bless the community. And he was saying, if you build the church on top of the surgery, on top of the hospital, on top of the school, then when they come to burn your church down, not if, when they come to burn your church down, they'll see the good you are doing for the city, and they might stop in their tracks. It's like Tim Keller said, if your church disappeared from your city, would your city miss you? And I'm encouraged to say that when I see the way you're shaping businesses and hospitals and schools and universities and communities and families and in all sorts of different ways, I know this city would miss you. And we need to let our light shine together across our city. We are light. God has positioned us strategically to influence, not for our own benefit, but to pour out our influence to bring blessing to the city. Sometimes people say to me, I'm just a teacher. You're not just a teacher. You're someone who's been entrusted with this extraordinary opportunity to shape the rising generation and pour your life into theirs. Sometimes people say, well, I'm just a painter decorator. You're not just a painter decorator. You're someone who, by God's grace, is participating in the renewal and transformation of all things through your skill. Oh, well, I'm just a lawyer. No, you're not just a lawyer. You're someone who's using your mind to unlock challenging situations. Oh, someone says, well, I'm just an artist. I'm just a photographer. No, you're not. You're someone who is using your gifts in order to reveal the beauty in our world that points to the beauty behind the beauty. Someone says, oh, I'm just a midwife. No, you're a midwife, you're a doctor. You're someone who comes alongside someone in the hour of greatest need and gives them comfort and encouragement and support. Oh, I'm just an economist, I just work in finance. No, you're someone who understands how dots are joined together and can release resources for God's kingdom purposes. Oh, I'm just an academic. No, you're someone who seeks to bring revelation and understand the truth behind our universe, in order that people might see what true revelation is. Someone says, I'm just a barista. No, you're someone who's been entrusted with one of the greatest resources on the face of the earth. And you give it to people in the hour of greatest need. You've been called. You've been sent. I was at a wedding recently, and the dance floor was kicking off. It was a bit early to dance. And I just got chatting to this guy by the side of the dance floor. And he mentioned what company he worked for. And I said, oh, I think I know a director of that company. He's a friend of mine. He says, yeah, he is. No, that's him. How do you know him? And I said, oh, well, actually we we go to the same church. He was like, he goes to church. And I was like, yeah. He's like, I've always wondered what it was about him. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm just a young guy. I'm junior. And he's not in my sector, so I don't work directly with him. But he's always looked out for our team. When he comes around the office, he's always warm, always cares. He said, he's on the board. And we've said a few times as a team, if he's okay with what's going on, then the organization's being probably operated in an ethical way. He said, yeah, there's something about him that's different. And I feel a peace knowing that he's on our board of directors. So interesting. He goes to church. I said, yeah. He said, does he go every week? I was like, pretty much. He said, can other people go to church? I said, yeah. I said, when? I said, well, we tend to do it on Sundays. He said, all right. Can people just show up? I said, we let people write in. He said, but I've got loads of questions. I'm not sure if church would be the right place for me. I said, church is a great place to bring your questions. I said, I've still got loads of questions. But you can come on Sunday, and then we start this thing called Alpha in a couple of weeks. Great opportunity to explore questions of life, faith, and meaning. He's there, side of the dance floor, drink in hand. He goes, I would love that. I didn't do anything. I just had a conversation before we went and threw shapes for an hour. But my friend had been salt and light in that workplace for years. And it had rubbed off on the team and on the culture. I think this is a time where as we're gathered together as a city on a hill, we shine to this city together. Times when we gather and we shine brightly across the city, and there's times when we scatter, when we go into our workplaces, our homes, our communities, our families. Don't underestimate the influence you carry. Don't underestimate how God can use your light to increase the good and oppose the bad wherever he has placed you. You've been called to influence for such a time as this. And this is a season where I think we have to be open to the ways that God is calling us to influence our workplaces, our communities, our families, our homes, and our city. Just think what might happen. Just think of the difference you might make. You're called to influence. In Jesus' name, amen.